Mankind, we have the tendency to reinvent the wheel at any given opportunity, and that is precisely what took place during 1972 inside the Victoria Pavilion at a Stampede Wrestling show. Welcome to Wrestling Through the Ages. The ladder match has become quite popular over the decades in both the indies and larger promotions like the WWF. But it did not originate in the WWF. In fact, the ladder match would make its first appearance in the most unlikely of places, Western Canada, deep in the prairies, in Calgary, Alberta. Before I go any further, I wanted to quickly mention that in May of 1962, wrestler Ray Stevens placed a ladder in the center of the ring, climbed to the top of the ladder, and performed his finishing move, the Bombs Away knee drop, on opponent Pepper Gomez. Ray Stevens was the first one to use a ladder inside the ring, but never thought at the time to make it a match stipulation. That would take place a decade later. Stampede Wrestling was based out of Calgary, Alberta, and in 1969, owner and promoter Stu Hart began booking Vancouver-based wrestler Danny Crawford. 3 years would pass until Stu would bring in Toru Kamata, a wrestler who was born in Hawaii but portrayed a Japanese wrestler because Japanese heels were slowly replacing the dated evil German heels. And Toru Kamata had several successful runs in Stampede, taking on Danny Babich, Dave Rule, Kurt Von Hess, and Jeff Ports. Toru Kamata and Dan Crawford would soon make history. Dan Crawford briefly mentioned his ladder match concept to Stu Hart in the past and should be credited as the sole creator of the match gimmick. And in September of 1972, a bag of money was suspended above the ring, attached to a light fixture, with both Kamata and Crawford battling one another in order to climb the ladder and secure the bag of money. This match took place inside the Victoria Pavilion, selling out the 1,800-seat capacity venue in Calgary, Alberta. Crawford would emerge victorious. A second match between the two took place 2 months later inside the Exhibition Hall in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, selling out again. This time, 1,257 people were in attendance and $2,000 was on the line. The match ended in a draw. 3 years later, a different style of ladder match popped up in Mobile, Alabama, inside the Expo Hall for Gulf Coast Championship Wrestling, in the form of an Asian ladder on a pole match with $500 dangling at the tip of the pole. The Mighty Yankees faced off against Big Bad John and Rip Tyler on the 20th and 27th of May, 1975. Technically, this was a ladder match which two teams took part of, making it the first pseudo-tag ladder match. The ladder match would make its return to Stampede Wrestling on July 27 of 1979 in Calgary, Alberta. Big Daddy Ritter defeated Jake Roberts. This was the first televised ladder match. The AWA would adopt this match concept in May of 1980 with a series of stepladder and ladder matches with $500 or $5,000. Dino Bravo defeated Jerry Blackwell 5 times and won $5,000. The ladder match evolved 1 year later in March of 1981 when two technical geniuses battled it out. Bret Hart defeated Dynamite Kid in Edmonton, Alberta. Championship Wrestling from Florida was next in line and hosted a ladder match pitting Butch Reed and John Studd in West Palm Beach, Florida on August 30th of 1982. Following this, Dusty Rhodes then defeated Jim Garvin in a ladder match with $10,000 on the line. Stampede Wrestling would up the ante, and on July 19, 1983, Bad News Allen and KY Wakamatsu defeated Bret Hart and Dynamite Kid in the first legitimate tag team ladder match in Regina, Saskatchewan. Bad News Allen would go on to lose to Bret Hart in a singles ladder match 3 days later in Calgary. 2.5 years would pass until Stu Hart booked 4 ladder matches between Honky Tonk Wayne and its creator, Dan Crawford, in mid-1986. Later that year, the AWA booked a stepladder match between Jerry Blackwell and Colonel Devers in St. Paul, Minnesota, with Jerry taking the win on November 27 of 1986. Shortly after, a very young Scott Hall would also defeat Colonel Devers in a stepladder match on December 6, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 6 days later, they upgraded to a full-size ladder, with Scott Hall taking another victory, this time in Wausau, Wisconsin. English-based wrestler Peter Thornley wrestled for Stampede Wrestling back in the 70s. In fact, he was on the same bill of the first two ladder matches, and upon returning home, he would bring this match type with him overseas, and on December 27 of 1986, under the in-ring moniker Kendo Nagasaki, not that Nagasaki, he feuded with Clive Myers in a hilarious disco-themed ladder match inside the Hippodrome in London, England for All-Star Wrestling. The following year, wrestler and booker Dusty Rhodes cranked it up a notch, making it even more dangerous. The first ever lights-out barbed wire ladder match was invented, and he defeated Tully Blanchard for $100,000 during the NWA's annual Great American Bash Tour in Charlotte, North Carolina, selling out the 25,000-seat Memorial Stadium. The Road Warriors were a huge hit in the 80s and showed true dominance. They were also no strangers to out-of-the-norm, hard-hitting, dangerous, hardcore wrestling bouts. They were booked against the Powers of Pain in early 1988, and on March 10, 1988, they defeated the Powers of Pain in a tag team ladder match, winning $50,000 for Jim Crockett Promotions. Ladder matches would take a backseat for nearly 4 years until July 21st of 1992, where the match was given a huge overhaul when Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels put on a clinic at a house show in Portland, Maine. WWF would book several of these matches with new up-and-coming star Razor Ramon defeating Shawn Michaels in 7 straight victories during a house show run. Indie promotion Canadian Rocky Mountain Wrestling put on 2 ladder matches in February of 1994, with Lance Storm defeating Chris Jericho twice in Calgary, Alberta. That same month, Razor took part in another ladder match, defeating IRS at a house show inside the Maple Leaf Garden. The USWA booked a less than stellar hubcap ladder match between Wolfie D and JC Ice. Photographer, manager, wrestling booker, Smoky Mountain Wrestling owner Jim Cornette would bring the heavily used ladder match to Smoky Mountain Wrestling that same year, with Tracy Smothers getting the best of Chris Candido, winning all 10 ladder matches. And on March 20th, the ladder match made its biggest impact yet at that year's WrestleMania. And it is due to this bout that the ladder match would begin its first oversaturation phase. A couple weeks would pass, and then bam, the first wave of promotions hit. WWF would push Jeff Jarrett in the mid-90s, so what better way to draw in an audience than serve them their favorite flavor of ice cream? Jarrett would go on to defeat the British Bulldog once, and Razor Ramon 7 times in ladder match bouts. I don't think I have to speak about the 1995 SummerSlam match. Ramon and Michaels put on yet again another masterpiece. And this is when phase 2 of the ladder match oversaturation began. Honestly, there's so many indie promotions that took this match type on in the 90s. I simply can't cover them all. The Attitude Era was just around the corner and would feature this match type heavily. ECW would innovate and popularize the ladder match phenomena here in North America, inventing a lot of spots and bumps you see now today on TV. Overseas in Japan, the IWA and FMW also cranked the ladder match to 11. Their ladder match would begin its final oversaturation phase. Like previously mentioned, small indie promotions would pepper their monthly cards with this match type. ECW was practically showcasing it on a weekly basis. WCW would book several of them, but failed to capture the magic of this match type. And with the Ruthless Aggression era now here, teams like the Hardy Boys, the Dudleys, Edge and Christian would reinvent this match type, yet again with some of the most terrifying spots to date. The ladder match evolved and branched out. Triple tag, free-for-all, three-way, it was truly the cherry on the top. It became so popular, TLC would eventually become its own pay-per-view, with the next generation of stars eager to mold this match type into something of their own. Dan Crawfat and Tor Kamata made history back in 1972 by placing a wooden ladder in the middle of the ring and duking it out in order to win $2,000, awing everyone in attendance. Back in the day and throughout the years, this match type got polished, kept up to date, and reinvented itself enough times with the help of fantastic talent, keeping the spectacle of the ladder alive to this very day. And we owe it all to a Vancouver-based wrestler working with a Japanese legend inside a small Canadian venue for Calgary's Stampede Wrestling. Thanks everyone for sticking around to the end. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for the ongoing support, and I'll see you next Friday for another episode of Wrestling Through the Ages.